So on the security piece, actually first, do we have any questions in there? No, it doesn't look like it yet.
Nothing yet. If you guys do have questions, toss them in the Q&A and I'll get to them.
So we started to talk about how AI gets better. If you were one of the early adopters of ChatGPT back in around this time, 2 years ago, when it really started to proliferate and people were experimenting with it, the first thing is you'll notice how much better it's gotten. But the second thing is, how did that happen, right? Well, AI models gain access to more data. If you're using something for free, we've known this forever, as long as free technology has existed. If you're using it for free, there is a cost somewhere. And the cost with AI is access to your data, which from a company standpoint is often sensitive or confidential or proprietary information, or it's your customers' data. And that's sometimes even worse. So when people are using those free AI tools, and to be completely honest, sometimes even the paid ones, you have to read the fine print, right? They still train, right? They might not sell it or do any, share it with third parties, but they're training the next generation of those models. So you have GPT 5.2 is the most recent one. If I'm at a company, we don't have a standardized policy, there's no standard tool, there's no secure AI. We've just been told, yeah, it's okay to use AI. And I just go to the free version and I have my list of all of my sales for the quarter, customer data, credit card info. I exported everything and I want to analyze it to see how we can do better next year. And I upload that into ChatGPT. I say, hey, can you analyze this? Help me find some trends. Maybe give me some strong leads for the next quarter. It'll do that, but that data, all of your customer data that's been uploaded, goes into a learning model where lots of algorithms and formulas and everything look at how that data was formatted and the questions that you asked about it and the trends that it found, and it learns from your customer's data and it puts all of that information that it learned into the large language model. So that next time when GPT-6 comes out and I say, you know, maybe I'm one of your competitors, right? And I say, can you tell me about my competitor down the road, the other dentist's office. Can you tell me about all of his clients and what procedures they've had done and how he's making his money? If you've put that information into a free model, that information can come right back out. So you open yourself up to competition, but you also open yourself up to a lot of liability and concerns with sensitive data leaking out. So LLMs can add your confidential info to their training data. We want to avoid that. So like we talked about, loss of intellectual property, your data is accessible to anyone. This has happened, right? There are actual real life instances of doctors' notes, being accessible by other people, patient data being leaked, copyright, infringement, all kinds of things. So your company data also goes with employees when they leave. If you say, all right, we're going to use AI, but everyone is going to have their own private version. Us as the company will reimburse you for a ChatGPT subscription. So it's, you can just submit that and we'll reimburse you. Well, what happens when that employee leaves? Yeah, sure, the company's no longer paying for it, but all of that company data that employee put into the system, even if it's protected in that bubble, when they go to the next company and they start asking questions, it's going to remember all of that information from your company. So there's really a big sense of urgency in some regard to being proactive and understanding how your employees are using AI, what they're using it for, what information they're putting in. We don't want to shine a spotlight or be punitive, for anyone who's using it because they're using it to find value and be more efficient. And we love that. We want to encourage that. But you also want to make sure you're you're being proactive and saying, as an organization, here's how we're going to handle this. And I think Chris, I think you would agree with everything on this slide. Data security should be a foundational consideration, not an afterthought. I think, as,
Absolutely.
yeah, as their trusted advisor, as their, the person who's managing the integrity of their data, the headache that can be caused by someone completely circumventing firewalls and everything and just dropping stuff into ChatGPT. Like, walk me through what you think about when if you hear that one of your clients is doing something like that.
I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is I'm not so sure I want to support this model because I'm putting my name on, and I'm putting my hand up and saying, hey, I feel comfortable saying you guys are secure when some of the behaviors might not lead to the utmost security, you know.
Yeah,
So that's the first thing that comes to my mind as an MSP supporting businesses.
yeah. And you're not alone in that. There are some MSPs that we partner with who say, we won't even take on a client if they're not standardizing their AI policies, if they're not using secure AI. It's kind of the same thing with cybersecurity. If, like, we're not going to be managing your data if you're not going to follow a certain set of pretty much industry standard uh, industry standards at this point. Um, it's a big issue. So the question that I want everyone to ask, internally, you could just ask yourselves, do you know right now how your team is using AI? And can you say for sure if that data is private? When we ask this with some of the MSPs that we partner with, and they have their clients in the room, the MSPs are actually at an advantage. They have an unfair advantage of being able to see if you're already uh, a, a client, like they can see your firewall. They can check what websites you're visiting if that's part of the plan that you're on, the data that they're managing, and they can actually check really quickly, just a couple of minutes, how many employees visited chatgpt.com, how many employees visited Gemini, how many employees use, all these different tools, and they can see within a couple of minutes whether or not that answer to this question is true or not. If you're saying, oh, no, no one's using it, or we are, but it's all private, they can check. And again, not to shine a spotlight on anyone who's doing anything wrong, but if there's no policy in place, that's I think, a good catalyst to get one in place. We had a conversation with a pretty large insurance firm a couple months ago, and the CEO was adamant. No one is using AI. We're not using it. It's not something we do. And their MSP said, all right, let's check. So they ran a report. They checked the DNS logs to see which websites, how many times, how many users, and it turned out that they had about 8,000 visits to ChatGPT that month. And the CEO was blown away and said, he put his hands up and said, I was wrong. let's let's have a conversation about how to fix this moving forward. But he didn't punish anyone for using it. There was no uh, there was no rule against it at the company. He just assumed that no one was using it. And you don't want to find yourself in that situation, right? Especially if it's 6 months later and you find out documents have been uploaded somewhere and you can't get them back out.